Hi everyone, welcome back again to another episode of Understanding Bach's Fugue. I'm Marco, and for today we will be analyzing the fugue from the Prelude and Fugue number 8 in D sharp minor from the Well-Tempered Clavier Book 1. This fugue has 3 subjects and no counter subject, yet Bach's genius use of augmentation and inversion makes this fugue very worthwhile to study. If you find this type of content helpful, please consider subscribing. A small appreciation can motivate us and also help us in producing more quality musical education content for everybody. Let's now begin. The subject of the fugue is first played in the alto. As it leaped from D to A in the beginning of the piece, we then get a tonal answer in the soprano. It's also important to take note that this fugue has no counter subject, as I said earlier. The answer is followed by a codetta which is marked in orange, and another entrance precedes it. Another codetta occurs afterwards, and it's interesting that an answer appeared after it and is played by the same voice that just had given the subject. The first episode follows it, modulating from G sharp minor to A sharp minor. The first episode closed with the entrance of the subject in the alto and in the soprano. Their entrances are treated as a canon in the octave. This means that the treble entrance is just an octave higher compared to the one in the alto. After a short codetta, there is a stretto occurrence where all voices enter starting from the treble, alto, and the bass in 1 beat's distance. With close observation, we can notice that the entrance in the alto was treated with augmentation. If you don't know what augmentation is, it refers to a technique in which the duration of the notes in a subject or melody is lengthened or prolonged. This means that each note, if not all, is played for a longer duration than the original melody. Let's look at one example. The original melody on the left consists of quarter notes and the half note. On the melody which applies augmentation, those quarter notes became half notes, and the half note became a whole note. This made the augmented part twice as long. Now going back to the fugue, I did not shade the bass entry fully because it is incomplete. Following it appears another entrance of the subject in the soprano and the answer in the alto. This is another canonic stretto occurrence, but now in 2 beats distance. It's also not in an octave actually, but it's rather than a fifth below. Then it gets more interesting from here. In measure 30, there is an appearance of the subject in the alto, but it is done by inversion. I marked this appearance in pink so we can easily recognize inverted entries. Now, an inversion is an approach in which the movements or intervals of the original melody are reversed or played upside down. This technique is used to create variety, highlight different aspects of the melody, and create new textures. For instance, let's have an example. As you can see, the direction of the notes is moving in exact opposites, as if the notes below are reflections of the one above. Now going back to the piece, we see another entry of the inverted subject in measure 36 by the alto. Then it is followed by also an inverted answer in the bass, but with an ornamentation in its opening note. After a short codetta, there is another entry of the inverted subject in measure 44, followed by another inverse entry in the treble. Rather incomplete, but still making another stretto occurrence as you see the alto enters again inversely after. In the following measure, all voices will enter again but with an interesting twist. They all play a fragment of the subject in a canonic imitation in the octave. In measure 54, we see another stretto occurrence with all the voice involved starting from the bass going up to the treble. All entrances are inverted in this particular stretto starting from the bass, alto, and treble. Then the subject makes an isolated entry in measure 57 in D sharp minor, signaling a return to the home key. Now let's take a look at the entrances in measure 61 and 62. As you will see in the next page, the bass entry here is augmented twice as low as the original, while the entry in the alto is in its correct form. In measure 64, there is another entry of an inverted answer in the treble. There is another entry of the subject in measure 67, and just above it is also an entry in the alto done in augmentation. This entry in the alto is also twice as slow, just like the one which just recently occurred. As the augmentation still goes on, the subject enters again in measure 69 and it is answered by the alto at measure 72. After a brief codetta, 3 entries of the subject occur again in measure 77. While the bass is in its original form, the alto and treble entries are both augmented, with the augmentation of the treble is slower than the alto. The coda of the piece starts in measure 83, and the piece ends in a Picardy third. And that's it, everyone. We covered the entrances, the measures where Bach initiated an inversion or augmentation. This fugue is very interesting because of those techniques that he used. Let's now listen to the fugue with the marks we put. And that's it. I hope you learned a lot about fugues, how they're composed, how they're analyzed, and I'm gonna be seeing you again on the next video.